Everybody, Josh Sheridan here with Barely Legal Podcast.
They demand my alter ego, but I won't go.
Today's guest is a good friend of mine and something a little bit different from the first two that you've heard. He is a former death metal guitarist, former law enforcement officer, former wedding photographer, and current private investigator. He is effectively my Ray Donovan or my Michael Con. He just fixes things for me. He's my fixer. So welcome to the show, Andrew Carlton.
Well, thank you for having me, Josh. Pleasure to be here. Love your studio.
Thank you so much. So you're a little bit of a different path today than our first two guests. So interested to see how this goes. Wanted to go back and start kind of at the beginning with you. Where were you born?
I was born and raised in Tampa, St. Joe's Hospital.
So you've lived here all your life?
Literally, 4 miles down the road from you, I think.
And how old are you?
45.
45.
Going on 23.
That's right. Yeah, I know we aging backwards, at least as far as our maturity level.
Right.
So where did you go to school?
I didn't. I dropped out in the 6th grade. I went to school throughout Tampa, did the stint at Hillsborough High School, and basically did the community college as opposed to the big school. By the time I graduated, everybody was getting into their 4-year degrees, and I was already in the police academy. So I didn't do the student loans. I went to basically the short route and got into my career early. I got hired at 23.
What department were you at?
Manatee County.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was that just where you got on, or were you seeking that out specifically? Or
No, when I graduated the police academy in 95, and back then there was basically a hiring freeze. Nobody was hiring. Tampa PD wasn't hiring. Hillsborough County wasn't hiring. So it was just kind of a death match of just throw your applications out everywhere.
Right.
And everybody in my academy class basically did that, and whoever hired you. I got a call from Manatee County, and within 2 weeks they hired me. Which, ironically, it was funny because I was getting married around that time, and I got married, and I got back from my honeymoon in Mexico. And the day after that, of a week of drinking and being crazy, I showed up Monday to do my physical assessment. So
red-eyed
I thought they were going to send me home immediately. So it was terrible.
We're sending you to a drug test right off the bat.
Exactly, yeah. But amazingly enough, they hired me. I'm not sure how, So I learned after being in law enforcement that. I've always been a business owner.
Right.
Like when I was in law enforcement, I was a photographer. I shot bands, weddings, portraits, model portfolios. And I just learned just having your own business, being your own boss is much better than having 50 bosses. So I always wanted to start my own business. And that's where I'm at now. I've been in business with my investigative agency since 2012. I also own a screening company where we do tenant screenings for property managers. We do pre-employment screenings for small business or large business owners. And I'm now, just as of this month, actually opening a security company. So we'll be doing security for property managers for condo associations, apartment complexes, and things like that. So
that's coming up a lot in the news. I just had a case the other day where a client of mine owns an Airbnb. It was in the newspaper for getting shot up.
Oh, yeah.
And so it seems like that there's a bigger need for that. But actually, I kind of want to go slower through your arc and kind of trajectory from musician to where you're at currently.
Right. So if you've ever seen Police Academy, the movie, that's kind of me. It was either go to jail or get into law enforcement. And
one extreme or the other.
Right. And I had many of my friends that had issues in school, and honestly, some of them passed away early, way too early. And I was just looking around me at 16, 17, 18 years old, and looking at myself like, I need to do something with my life. And I was playing shows throughout Tampa, going on tours.
Well, let me ask you about that before we gloss over that. So when did you pick up an instrument?
I was 3 years old.
Was it?
It was an acoustic guitar my dad got me for Christmas. It was taller than me. It was just I don't know if he was expecting me to take it seriously, but he got my brother a drum set. He got me an acoustic guitar, look like the one that Bo plays down there. And it was basically, from then on, I remember.
Straight shot. You didn't have any breaks or give up
No,
at all.
no. I went through. I remember in first grade, I had not a talent show, but a show and tell.
Right.
And I brought my guitar. I remember, I don't know if it was first grade, but one of them, second, third grade, I was playing Michael Jackson's "Beat It" to the class, and I had the amp there. And
how cool!
So yeah,
I might have peaked at that point in life. That's a pretty
well, it was just one of those things to where it came natural to me as far as wanting to play music.
What was your first band?
The first band I had was called Rage, and it was a band that we started. I was in fourth grade.
Oh, what? Rage in fourth grade.
I was in a band called
You're
Rage.
ahead of the curve,
oh,
man.
Yeah.
I didn't start getting Rage until puberty.
Yeah,
So.
and I had a buddy of mine named Matt Newman, who is now, where's he at? He travels the world, but he was
As a musician?
No, he's a
Or a fugitive?
kind of like a peacekeeper. He was a monk for a while.
Oh,
He
wow.
just does he's a great guy, but he was a classmate of mine. I was like, "Hey, Matt, do you want to play bass?" And he's like, "What's a bass?" And so he went out to Edwards Music on 56th Street. Bill Edwards, if anybody remembers Bill, would be amazing, but he owned a little tiny music shop on 56th Street in Temple Terrace, and he went out and bought a Court bass. And
What's a Court bass?
A Court was a brand that just didn't survive very long, but so we just started playing in his garage and my house, and then we met a guy who's still in Tampa named Jerry Monolero. Jerry plays with a lot of bands. He's been asked to join Megadeth on tour to do backing guitars, and so Jerry's still like really heavy in the industry. But we just started a band, and I mean Matt's an amazing musician. He topples me just tenfold. I watch him play now, and he has videos on YouTube and Facebook that I'm just like, wow. We're talking like just Primus type bass player,
different
just
level.
making me,
That's cool.
yeah. So anyway, so we started that, and then from there it was Artistic Butchery,
Artistic Butchery.
which was even heavier.
Yeah.
I mean, we had,
Who were you listening to
our
at that
influence
age?
were Slayer, Nasty Savage, Morbid Angel, Deicide, like real heavy bands that just originated, most of them in Tampa.
Well, that's what I was going to ask
So-
you. Were you aware of geographically
Not
what
at
you
the
were
time.
born into?
No, not at the time.
I mean, for those listening who don't know, Tampa is like the Vatican of death metal.
yeah, for sure.
Or the Clearwater of Scientology, as it were.
I mean,
so,
you Google search death metal capital of the world, and Tampa shows up. So we're in Tampa, and I'm playing in at places like the Volley Club and Brass Mug. Back when the Masquerade was way back in the heyday, the Masquerade was where the Ritz is now. But all these bands are either practicing in one of the storage units a block away, and they would just come in all the time. They'd play locally with us. So we got to know a lot of the guys, and like Ben Myers, he's in Nasty Savage, or at least was. They've reformatted since then, but Dave Austin and all these guys who were just my idols as a guitarist who's 10, 11, 12 years old. They're local guys that are just international stars.
So what age was Artistic Butchery for you? From how old to how old?
12, 13 years old, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Maybe a little earlier, 12. I don't know exactly, but somewhere around those
So
preteen years.
You've just always been the young guy in whatever field you're entering into. Like the Doogie Howser of death metal.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
yeah. And
That's going to be the title of the show today, by the way, Doogie Howser of death metal.
no, so we were playing at the Brass Mug at like 13 years old. My mom, bless her heart, she passed away, in 2017.
Yeah, we lost our moms pretty
both of
quickly
us
after
did,
each other. Yeah.
And she was just totally supportive, and I lost my dad when I was 5 years old, so she basically raised me and my brother.
Right.
But she was very supportive. She would load all of our equipment up, and we're talking like bass amps, drum kits, and just we're loading them up into a Ford Escort, or my buddies, we call it the banana wagon because he had this big old yellow van that got pulled over too many times. But she would help us load up our equipment, we and stay at these shows until 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
and just help us transport
At 13
it back.
years old?
Yes, no
God,
doubt.
I'm trying to think what I was doing at 13 years old. It
Yeah.
wasn't anything remotely as cool as that.
Right. Yeah. It was an interesting time, but she enjoyed it. She wanted to see us succeed.
Well, so one of my favorite bands is the Minutemen, and different type of music, but Mike Watt and D Boone, who are like the two main guys of that band, they met when they were about 12, and it's a similar story where, the mom, in an effort to kind of keep them off the streets and keep their noses clean, actually got them in a band with each other, because she figured if they were in a club playing, they weren't somewhere else,
Right.
selling drugs, using drugs, or whatever else. So
Yep.
similarities there. But anyway, so Artistic Butchery, then what came next?
That was our mainstay for a long time, and we actually recorded a demo at Moore Sound Studios.
Okay.
And we did small little tours, but then I had a band with my cousin.
Okay.
They asked me for some help, and that band was called Allison with One.
Okay.
And that's actually on YouTube with our music. But that band was kind of like Madonna on acid.
Okay.
And it was
Or
more
just Madonna.
Yeah, kind of, but it was more dancey but industrial.
Right.
And we did 2 CDs with them and did a southeastern tour with that band. And from there, that's when I was, I think, 18, 19 at that point, and life was creeping up as far as like career goals and what am I doing with myself.
So that was an internal monologue you were having.
Right, and the band at that point in time wanted everybody to move to Gainesville because those guys were getting into college.
Right.
And one was wanting to be I think a heart surgeon. The other was they were all up in Gainesville. And I'm a Tampa guy. I'm like, I'm not moving to Gainesville.
Right.
It's not that far away, but they were adamant about it. So we went our separate ways, and I decided that I was going to join the police academy.
So after Allison with One is when you kind of turned the corner and started to...
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Never look back, or do you still...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've always had my guitars. For a while, I had to kind of put them in a closet.
We're going to have to talk about your current band in a second. We'll get there later.
Right.
So you went to the academy and you get on at Manatee County. So my knowledge of Manatee County is kind of interesting. So my wife and I got married in Anna Maria Island, and I go there every summer. So I drive through Manatee County, but it seems like Manatee County is a different world by the traffic light,
Right. Manatee County has a little bit of everything. It has your ghetto, has your country, it has your islands, it's just literally everything that you really want to experience, I guess. But as far as where I worked, I immediately worked in the high crime areas. And
I was going to ask, so you patrol right away?
Yeah. So we went in and my class, I think I was hired in just the beginning of 98 or ending of 97, but it was the high crime areas, and from there I went to the selective enforcement division. When I did, I think, 3 years in patrol was when I went to selective enforcement, which is basically you put out all the fires for the sheriff, which is anytime the sheriff has something he doesn't like, he calls the selective enforcement division and says, hey, get your guys on this. At that time, most of it was construction surveillance or robbery surveillance, where we're just trying to, kind of like the first 48, where something happens and we would just go out and try to solve the issue. And then from there, it was the Violent Crimes Task Force. I was also a hostage negotiator for 6 years. So
hostage negotiator?
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay,
So
you're definitely coming back for future podcasts.
Yeah, so anytime they had a call out, we'd go handle that. My
A
longest,
lot of hostages getting taken in Manatee?
it's usually like a barricaded subject where somebody
Like a
would not wanna
boyfriend's
come
mad at a
outside.
girlfriend. Yeah.
90% of the time it's domestic related. And I think my longest negotiation was 8 hours. And it's one of those things to where people are like, why don't you like talking on the phone? I'm like, I used to talk on the phone way too much. So texting, thank God it's around these days. But that's basically it.
So one of the things I've had this discussion with other friends that are in law enforcement, but I'd be interested to get your kind of take on it. So I am the biggest, and I just said this to Madge, whose podcast came out today, but in his interview, I am one of the bigger chicken shits you're going to run across in your life. I just, I don't see how I would be able to do that job. And do you think that's something that was in you from an early age? Is that something they teach you at the academy?
No, I mean, it's brainwashing, and that's what law enforcement is. I mean, it's literally the police academy and FTO and just surrounding yourself in that environment. it's brainwashing to where the point to where when you graduate the academy and when you get out of training, they're trying to yell at you that a 9-year-old lady is going to kill you with a gun.
Right.
And it puts fear into people to the point to, or not, it puts fear into law enforcement officers coming out of the academy that, yeah, there's a level of officer safety you always have to pay attention to, but it's overly pounded into your head to where when you're doing training scenarios at the police academy, it's just a traffic stop, somebody didn't use their turn signals, and some 90-year-old lady's getting out of the car with a Ruger down her pants, and I'm
Right.
like, okay, is this real life?
Yeah.
Not to say it doesn't ever happen, but it's literally one of those things to where.
So you aren't naturally a badass.
No, well, it's not even being a badass. Yes, there's an element of, okay, you have to have that ability to walk into a situation
Right.
knowing it's dangerous. But I think when I see, not to get on this topic, but when I see, video of law enforcement abuse of power and things like that, I think it's just lack of training and over, maybe the wrong type of training, and just, I guess the mentality aspect of it is, okay, you're on a team, you have backup, and they have this overconfidence of, okay, I can do this. If shit hits the fan, I've got 3 people on the way. They're going to be here to help me out. I can't tell you how many fights I got into just working in the high crime areas, but there's 3 fights I got into in my career that scared me, and one of which I was literally probably 0.3 pounds of pressure on a trigger away from shooting somebody in the head, because it was literally just one of those situations where I've got two deputies telling me to shoot this guy, and I'm just like, wanting to give him another half a second, and you learn from things. Obviously, you learn from incidents that happen, but I could have killed him and gotten away with it.
Sure.
But I got razzed a little bit for not doing it.
Jeez.
But you make
Positive reinforcement.
You make those
Yeah.
decisions in a split second, and
Yeah.
I decided not to, not because I'm a pussy,
Yeah.
but because I just felt that it wasn't immediately needed.
Right.
So, I can't Monday night quarterback situations, but me as a deputy, I knew that, just looking, I didn't fit into the mold.
Right.
And I would just always had that kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but I just knew I didn't belong.
When did it kind of reach a breaking point?
Well, 5 years I was not happy.
Yeah.
I was going to work depressed all the time. I told my captain at 8 years that I wanted to take a leave of absence, and he talked me into staying, and so I did. But I always knew that there was something better for me, and I
Right.
hated going to work pissed off, and that I see that all the time.
I see it all
with
the time
law
in the
enforcement.
courthouse.
They're just
Yeah.
so in such shitty moods where I'm like, if you don't like what you're doing,
Don't
get
do
out
it,
of
yeah.
it. Get, you're hurting
Judges too,
yourself.
yeah, yeah.
And I see that a lot in that career field. But you get stuck into it because you have insurance, you have retirement, you have all this stuff, and it's like, what am I going to do? I mean, when I left law enforcement, I felt like just a new person.
Right.
I had no just nobody looking over me as far as you can't imagine that. They tell you where you can hang out, where you can't hang out, who you can be with, who your friends can be, and it's just one of those things to where I want to be me. I want to be my own person. So it just, it's a new life, and I'm not talking bad in any way towards, the career field or law enforcement officers. But for me personally,
Just not your
there's
thing.
no way I could have done 25, 30 years doing it.
So how old were you when you stopped?
32.
So what's that? 13 years ago. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then did you know what you were doing when you stopped, or did you figure that out later?
I had my photography business going, and
Was that doing all right?
yeah, it was doing good. I was shooting anywhere between 3 to 4 weddings a week.
Oh wow.
I was shooting beach portraits. I was shooting, and not that I was passionate about doing that. I was passionate about shooting bands and concerts and
Right.
Things that even shooting dogs at the dog park. Gave me some
Joy.
just joy about, oh, look at these dogs, they're so beautiful and happy. But the money, where you're going in, you're saying, okay, I'm going to pay my mortgage,
Right.
was in weddings. So I did that for a while. And when the economy dived in 2008, 2009, you kind of had to make do, kind of hoard yourself out to anything that was available.
Right.
But I got a phone call that said, "Hey, look, I think you would do good in this business.
Okay.
You need to become a private investigator." I'm like, I really don't want to have anything to do with law. I don't want to have anything to do with
Did
law
your fear it was going to
enforcement.
be going right back into the same thing?
Yeah, it was just, reading Discovery and police reports and all that. I was just like, oh, do I really want to get back into that? And it's just, I felt that being as my own business, I could do it in a way that gave me some satisfaction.
Right.
And that's when the criminal defense, a world approached me and was like, "Hey, look, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I could use your help." And that's kind of how it unfolded. I see, and again, not that it's done on any level of. I don't want to say law enforcement officers go out of their way to falsify information,
Right.
but I can point out very easily where mistakes are made in a police report, where facts don't add up.
You can
where
kind of do a
there's-
peer review of a police report and say, you might want to look at this or ask this person about that.
Exactly. It's like, okay, there's 20 witnesses here. Why did they only interview 3?
Right.
We go back and we do a canvass of a neighborhood,
You
and we
out
find
the
these
stories.
witnesses.
The story's
and,
completely different.
Well, that is like, you find a lady that says, "Yeah, I gave the officer my statement," and it's nowhere in the police report.
Right.
Her name's not listed anywhere, and it's exculpatory evidence that could help the client,
Right.
help the defense on a matter. And it's like, okay, did you purposely leave that out because it didn't match
sloppy
up,
or was it intentional?
Right.
Yeah.
So just little things like that. I mean, I not to get into details, but there's been specific cases where you just call people out on that, and you submit that information to the state attorney's office, even like in a pre-filing situation,
Right.
where they're like, "Oh my God, we didn't know that. Okay, we're gonna not file this."
Sure.
So
So let's kind of dive in a little bit more on. So what's the name of your business?
well, it's Carlton Litigation Consultants.
Okay.
That's the investigative agency, and then we have CLC Screenings, which is the tenant screening, pre-employment screening, and then the security company, which is just started, is Carlton Asset Protection and Security.
So breaking down those 3 areas, what's taking up most of your bandwidth presently?
The investigative industry. I mean, as far as the screening company, we get a steady flow of
That's more
background
assembly
checks.
line, isn't it? Like just
Right,
give me
they
the
come
person's
in-
name, we'll run a skip trace or whatever you call it on them.
Well, we process, we do credit, we run their nationwide background check, evictions, lien judgments. As far as like somebody who's renting a property, we want to make sure that they're qualified for the client. If we do income verifications and rental history verifications, that can take a little more time, but it is streamlined. We have a database that does most of it, but as far as timeline, as my day is consumed by hunting, for the most part, facts for defense cases. We do some personal injury stuff. We'll do family law for sure. We
So
do
that's
service of process. Helping law
Well,
firms.
this is. I really want to kind of spend some time on each of these because I know with my colleagues, we have locally these social media pages. We've got one for the family law bar. We've got one for the criminal bar, and I feel like the criminal bar knows you a little bit more than the family law bar does. But
Yes.
I'm trying to, preach the word of Andrew Carlton as much as I can to my family law people because, it's not there. Yeah, there is police involvement, but obviously with every criminal case, there's police involvement. With family law, that's not always the case. But you've just been invaluable to me when I think back over, you and I had a professional relationship probably going back 5-6 years. And obviously there's one case, which we're not going to use the name of, that I'm sure we both know who we're talking about, where you had to be out on a boat and, to trail people. And so, but difficult process service, trying to get people who are intentionally trying to not be served, serve people that might be a dangerous service, all sorts of stuff, figuring out what assets people have. Your business is so not only multifaceted, but it's so relevant to, for me, family law and criminal. And I could see in PI too, especially if you're doing asset checks on a defendant. But what's a breakdown, would you say, of the practice area that you service with your business?
Well, it's starting to switch over to, and I don't know if it's by choice, but the family law is this past 6 months has gotten kind of crazy. In your cases, always seem to be a challenge.
I know I'm like a magnet for these things.
But yeah, the family law, they seem to, they're always some unique, weird situation. And whether or not, the attorney is looking to mitigate a case, or if it's going to be something that's going to get drawn out. This year, it seems like they have not only been more challenging, but they've been a little taking up a little bit more of my time, which I don't mind. It's just a matter of getting assistance, and that's kind of one of the issues I'm running into.
Staffing yourself.
Staffing and getting investigators, interns, and in this case or in this industry, when an attorney hires you per se, they think I'm hiring Andrew Carlton, and if I have an intern or I have another investigator that's helping me out, okay, well, do they want my other investigator or my intern doing this case, or do they want me doing it?
And there's a price difference there, right?
Yeah, well, it can be, but usually when I'm working with an intern, I'm basically following in his footsteps, making sure that they're doing everything correctly, or we're going together. You know, so it actually kind of breaks my bank a little bit, because I'm having to pay my intern to follow me and cover my hourly rate. So, but I don't want to be a humongous business. I don't want 20 employees. I don't want 30. I want, at least for the investigative side of things, I want me to have control and to be doing,
make sure the service is where it needs to be.
Right. Most of the work. As far as the screening company, I want that to blow up.
But that's something that you could put like 2 or 3 support staff in place, and it's just like I said, assembly line. It comes in, okay, we process it. There's a standard report that we run. If you want to kind of upcharge for these little extras, we can do that. And so I mean that doesn't necessarily need you touching the file every day, right?
Right, and we're getting into drug screening as well. So for pre-employment,
well, that's coming up a lot for me in family law. It's always amusing to me is I had these couples who probably met at a concert on acid, smoked pot for the entirety of their marriage, and now they're getting a divorce. And they're pointing fingers at each other for using drugs. It wasn't a problem during 13 years of marriage, but now that you guys are separating, that's, the other person's the devil. So, and I've heard judges say, if this was going on to the marriage, don't expect me to get too out of sorts about it now. So,
exactly.
But, there's a lot of Kathy Suarez at DACO, and, these other, they want, and everybody's like, I'll give you urine. It's like, well, great. Will you give me a fingernail? Will you give me a hair follicle?
Exactly.
And just for the people, why are those different?
Well, I mean, your hair follicles and the drug test on that is just a wider range of substances that you can test for. A
broader panel of substances.
Yeah, broader panel, and it kind of gives a better long-term history of what you've done versus, urine's typically, a short-term result. So. Gotcha.
So ideally, what's your business look like in 5 years?
It's hard to say. I would love to say that I've got my own building, like the amazing Josh Sheridan.
I'll sell it to you.
And I would like to traveling. I never travel, so I would love to travel more and be able to handle my business remotely from afar. Yeah. 10 years from now, I'd like to honestly see the investigative side of my business probably settle down a little bit. Yeah. I'm 45. I don't really want to be 70, running around,
Well, that's just it. I'll text you and it's like, I got to sit in front of this house till 2:00 in the morning. And that's hard to, have a normal life and a normal relationship with someone when you're, sitting in a car for those hours.
Exactly. And if I can get some clients to some international and national clients on the screening side of things, I would, like that business to kind of take over for my pre-retirement and allow that to, just kind of be the caveat of my existence at that point. And who knows, a security company, it's brand new. I have some clients that are ready to sign contracts. If I get, a handful of clients, it's a Florida-based agency, so it can be all over, throughout the state of Florida. We'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Any interesting stories since you've been in the private investigator side? Any?
They're all classified.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we get interesting cases. The most interesting one as of late was, when somebody has, I guess it's more so the higher the financial loss for the client, the weirder the case, it seems.
Sure. Yeah.
But we've gotten cases for major league ball players
Yeah.
where they're traveling around to who knows where,
Having
and
families in different states, and yeah.
right, they're wanting us to follow their husbands to all these games and stake out the hotels they're staying
What's
at.
the ratio of following husbands to following wives? 90-10?
Yeah, I don't think
Damn
honestly.
husbands, yeah.
I mean, you get cases where when you're following wives.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's usually the husband, for whatever reason, and I can't say that. When we do the cases, we go in like a non-biased party. We're not going to get involved as far as pointing fingers, but we dictate, or we describe what we see. We note facts, and it tends to always. Here's kind of my play on things. When somebody says, "Hey, I feel Mr. Smith is doing X, Y, Z," intuition is always, something to look at. And
Occam's razor, usually the simplest answer is the right one. Yeah.
But a judge or an attorney, they don't want to see that. They want to see video of some guy at the bar, going up some lady's skirt.
Right.
So
yeah.
And for whatever reason, women like to see that video. Like sometimes it's like, I don't even care about this court case. I just want to prove that he's doing something.
It's just the principle, or
right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to turn down a case sometimes, but something like that, honestly, if it's something that's not going to benefit them legally,
Yeah.
Sometimes I just don't feel like, I'm a busy guy, and I
Yeah.
don't really feel like me spending 50 hours out of my week just to kind of help your emotional needs.
Is
Sometimes it's
supposed
just
to be
not
doing.
what we need to do. So
That makes sense.
I ask my clients all the time, do you have an attorney?
Yeah.
And if they say no, I'm like, get an attorney.
Yeah.
Ask your attorney what you need to do on an investigative standpoint, because if I spend 70 hours chasing somebody and you go talk to an attorney afterwards, and the attorney says, oh, that's not what we need this kind of evidence.
Yeah.
We've just wasted their budget. We've wasted my time. So I recommend an attorney to all my phone calls that I get that aren't represented. And it's got to be a collaboration between the client, the attorney, and me, and just what the end goal is. If you don't have an end goal, typically there's no case.
Right. Very interesting. So, just wrapping up, a few things I wanted to chat with you about. First is you've got an amazing T-shirt on.
I know, this awesome dude gave me this as a gift.
He's got a Misfits T-shirt on that is very distinguished.
I've gained a
attorney.
little weight since you gave it to me.
Yeah.
So the skull looks like a pumpkin head right now.
I have it in my closet. I have drawers for Thin Josh and Fat Josh. So I'm in the Fat Josh drawer these days. But
Right.
there's a number of T-shirts I can't wait to be able to wear again. So have you seen any good shows lately?
We saw, me and my girlfriend Laura, we saw King Diamond in Orlando a couple
For
weeks
those of you who
ago.
don't know, YouTube King Diamond or look him up online. He's like a death metal
Opera singer.
who wears corpse paint and like a top hat, and pretty interesting character. But anyways, how was that show?
It was great. He is a trained opera singer, so every venue that he goes and plays at live, it has to be a opera balcony type setting, and
For like acoustics and whatnot.
yeah, and it was at the Disney Orchestra. I forget the name, but yeah.
You were telling me about this. So it was kind of two different crowds mixing with each other.
Right. So this venue had two functions that night, and one was the King Diamond show, and one, I don't know what it was, but there was people, in tuxedos and ballroom dresses, and we were passing each other in the halls and at the bars, and it was literally the definition of coexist. Like, I see these cars with the coexist sticker on the back, and I'm like, that was pretty much the King
Yeah.
Diamond show, because we were all sitting at the bar, we're in line, for drinks, and they've got this merchandise line that's 100 people deep, and there's like ballroom dancers, or what I don't know what was going on. I assumed it was like a ballroom dance environment, but
Well, I love that, because one of the things with this podcast, a lot of people keep saying, well, what's the point of it, or what's it about? And the honest answer is, I don't know. But, what I'm kind of finding that I like about it is kind of introducing people to industries, whatever the thing may be that may be foreign to them, because it's funny that a lot of these people, have so much different about them, but they have more in common. And usually, there's a point of interest there. I was telling you about, so the theme music for this show, Wolfface, I went and saw them down at it was like a moose lodge by Lowry Park. And it was all these, hipsters and young punkers and such. And a couple of my friends who were attorneys were there. And right next door was like this Latino wedding of they had to be like 18 years old, and so you had these two different crowds in the same building, and everybody thought it was cool and getting along with each other, so it was pretty funny. So anyway, if people want to hire you for your private investigator services, your screening services, your security services, what's the best way to reach you?
The easiest way is my website, which is carltonlitigation.com. And all of my websites link together from there. You can, if you're looking at the investigative services, there's a service request page on there. There's also a link to the tenant screenings and the CLC Screenings website. And then in the works still is our Carlton Asset Protection and Security website, which is coming along pretty quickly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely.
There's, I could spend a lot of time talking about your musical career, but
including our band, which is
that's right.
So
that's right. We have a band that we've never practiced or played live before, but
we spent a year and a half going over band names, though.
We've spent a year and a half changing band. At first, it was the Contempt.
Oh, it's not that anymore. I don't know.
Well, now it's and for the Florida bar. Turn off the podcast for a second. Now it's the Fuck Hammocks, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Which I think is the best name.
It has a special meaning to it, I guess.
Well, so that came. There was I don't know if it was like an Onion article or what, but there was an article about the Skyway Bridge putting up nets to prevent suicides on the bridge, and that the city was fearful that the nets would be used as hammocks for carnal knowledge, as it were.
And let me tell you, that Skyway Bridge, I've gone up there a handful of times to talk people down, and when you get out of your car and you're standing on that thing, it sways back and forth.
Did you ever go over the old one?
No, not
I went over the old one.
Well, when I was a kid, yes. But
well, sure.
So,
well, it was.
I was like 3 years old or something. I can't.
If you
remember.
went over it now, that would be pretty impressive.
No, but what I'm saying is, I don't remember ever going over it. I'm sure I did, but
it was a nightmare, man. Because like the whole middle section of it was perforated steel, and so it makes that sound when you're going over it, and then you can look down. And see,
I've done more drugs than you in the past because you actually remember that.
Yeah.
How old are you? You're my age.
44.
Yeah. So if you remember it,
I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember ever going over it, and I know I did.
Well,
how do you remember it? Like, seriously.
Well, so I have a specific. This is kind of interesting. So my dad was a biology teacher, which meant that I won every science fair in my life in grade school. And I actually did. I went to the state level science fair. It was on the Skyway Bridge, and one of the interesting things about it is evidently when they mixed the cement for the old one, they used seawater to mix with the cement. And the problem with mixing the seawater is the salt soaked up a lot of the water, so it didn't absorb into the cement the way that they wanted it to. And so it was much more fragile than it should have been, and that played a big part into kind of how it broke up when the ship hit it.
Gotcha.
So
thank you for the science lesson.
There you go. God, this show is for everyone. So anyway, thanks again. I appreciate you coming, and we'll hopefully have you back.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.